Israel is escalating its apartheid, its occupation, its settlement expansion. It's becoming more apologetic about its fascism and its treatment of the Palestinian people. Human rights organizations around the world are coming to a consensus. Many people that would have before been staunch supporters of Israel have now switched.
Yeah.
You have a growing sentiment of pro-Palestinian solidarity amongst young people. So in the West, public opinion's changing on Israel. Young Jews are challenging Israel from within and without. Now, the one thing that Israel needed to function in the Middle East was normalization with surrounding Muslim countries. When you skip over the Palestinians, you participate in the dehumanization and the oppression of the Palestinians. When you now say we're going to normalize with the state of Israel and not make its occupation or apartheid consequential. You see, the United States of America has always given a blanket check to Israel. Now when you have Muslim countries that are saying, continue on with your oppression, we might give some statements of condemnation the way the United States does, but functionally speaking, continue on with your oppression and you will still get all of the economic benefits. And we're going to use the name of Abraham. We're going to call it the Abraham Accords. It is deeply insulting to me as a Muslim, deeply insulting as a Palestinian, deeply insulting as a human being, and as a person who would hope to stand for justice. What a great injustice that you silence an oppressed people in the name of Ibrahim, alayhi salam, in the name of Prophet Abraham, and then call this some sort of great interfaith initiative when you are suffocating Palestinian Muslims and Christians, by the way, and helping, make the chokehold tighter now on the Palestinians. So I am deeply opposed to it. I think that people that live in those countries are deeply opposed to it. I think that the Abraham Accords are nothing but apartheid deals and arms deals that are bundled into this warped new theological political worldview that simply means access to power, lack of accountability for power, and they use the dressing of unity to actually further the occupation and the disenfranchisement of the Palestinian people. But with all that being said, I am a person of faith. I also believe the Palestinian people have enormous willpower and strength. We're not going away. We're a hard-headed people. I've learned that from my cousins that I've never met that live under occupation. They will work and they will exist and they will still live and they'll still go to their mosques and they'll still have their weddings and they'll still learn and uplift themselves. They'll work every odd job in the world to feed their families, and they are married to the cause of Palestinian liberation, and they will not succumb to even the most bleak of circumstances. So I have a lot of hope that the Palestinian people will survive and that their liberation will come, inshallah. I believe in that. But I also will openly challenge the hypocrisy of Muslim countries that use this warped notion of interfaith and the name of Abraham for apartheid and arms deals. It's unacceptable. And it's important for Muslims, wherever they are, to put pressure on their countries when they can. I understand, look, I can't tell you how many people that come from those countries will come to my mosque on Friday. All right, will come to the masjid on Friday and tell me after Jummah, look, I can't be seen in a picture with you because you're criticizing my government for the Abraham Accords or something like that. But all of the people, they're like, all of us, all of our families are critical of this. We just can't say anything. So the more you silence those voices of dissent, I think the more that normalization will spread, which is why I believe that the imperative of BDS, of the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, is that great because it is the strategy that South Africans employed against apartheid. It's the only global strategy that I think will work just from a pure strategical perspective. Of course, we need God's help, in all of this, but it's important for us to really actively engage that cause, actively engage that movement, because the only way you can make a country like Israel accountable is through economic pressure, because it's politically being given the green light to operate as it pleases with the support, the continued support, which has always been there, unfortunately, from the United States government, as well as now surrounding Muslim nations. I'm very encouraged. You asked me, I'm being very open and blunt here, about a place like Malaysia.
Yeah.
When I tell someone in Malaysia that I'm Palestinian,
they're happy.
The love, the respect, the solidarity that's immediately expressed. And I know that to be the case in Indonesia, the largest pro-Palestinian protests. The solidarity from Indonesia, the solidarity from Malaysia, the solidarity from Algeria, the solidarity. You saw the Moroccan football team, by the way, holding the Palestinian flag. But guess what? The government of Morocco normalized with Israel. So the people are different.
They're detached. Yeah.
The people are different. And I think Palestine is the cause that unites the Ummah. I do think, when you think about like a cause that brings the Ummah together, I think Palestine is in the hearts of most Muslims around the world, and it can bring people together. And I think humanity sees the blatant injustice in this holy place. How can a place that held prophets and that holds such sacred meaning to so many people be a place where an occupying military spews skunk water on people and steps on old women and shoots people to death, media people, burns down buildings, media buildings, shoots journalists point blank with absolutely no global consequence. The world sees this happening, and the amount of unaccountable cruelty, I think, hopefully will drive people to reject much of what is happening. So the whole Abraham Accords, and it's interesting because I meet people, and I'm someone that's worked with other faith leaders to do social justice work. We, here in Dallas, our anti-homelessness, not anti-homeless, anti-homelessness initiatives, our poverty initiatives, our, adopt a school initiatives, our work rejecting racism and bigotry together. Sometimes I'll have someone come up to me and say, "What do you think about the Abraham Accords? Great, right?" And I'm like, "No, not great at all." Because it sells sometimes to the innocent mind that simply sees unity, which is, of course, an admirable thing, unifying people, and doesn't see sort of the political nefariousness here. And of course, I think, there's all sorts of problems with all of the implications of the Abraham Accords, politically, theologically, socially, but the core thing driving it is definitely normalization with Israel, with the state of Israel. Look, my parents, we talk about the success stories. My father could have forgotten Palestine. All right, he's a distinguished professor of chemistry, loved, embraced, welcomed, has invented multiple things in his field. It was very hard being a child of a scientist of that caliber, mashallah, but is an incredible human being, successful, accomplished human being. But Palestine is always his heart and his mind. My mother, same thing. Palestine was always heart and mind. We have been nurtured. I've never been to Palestine. I can't go there yet. But we have been nurtured with this idea that Palestine runs through our blood and it's in our hearts, and our success does not matter on an individual level unless we're able to continue to uplift the plight of our people in Palestine. And, when Nelson Mandela said that our freedom is incomplete until the Palestinians are free, a great anti-apartheid icon and warrior, and one that was very inconvenient to pro-Israel advocates because Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, and all of the South African anti-apartheid, icons were pro-Palestinian, which is inconvenient to the narratives that exist here. No one sees the liberation of Palestine as more imminent and important than the Palestinian people themselves. And the day after a bombing, they will still go to their mosques for Fajr.
Oh, sure.
They will still have, in Gaza, what they do is they do group weddings. Yeah. So I have family in Gaza I've never met. Because they can't afford to get their young grooms and brides married individually. What they'll do is they'll get 1,000 people married at a time. They'll still do Eid the day after a bombing. And of course, unfortunately, Israel intensifies the bombing every Ramadan, which always is something that connects our hearts to that place. So the people of Indonesia and in Malaysia, Jazakumullah khairah, thank you for your solidarity. Because like when we see that level of solidarity from people, protests in the thousands and thousands and thousands, that lets us know that we're not alone.
Yeah.
Because it's feeling lonelier in the Middle East for the Palestinian people. And so they broadcast those images around now. You know, they have social media with the Palestinians too now. You know what goes around Palestinian WhatsApp groups? Indonesian protests, Malaysian protests. Wow. That's what circulates. Look at these people. Gaza is getting bombed right now, and people in Gaza are circulating videos of people protesting in Indonesia, saying, they're with you. They're with you. We're with you. And so that solidarity is that much more important now.
You know, I've had the opportunity to visit the West Bank.
Wow.
Some years ago with my wife. And I can relate a little bit to what you've been alluding to. I want to push on this a little bit.
Okay.
You've said a number of times that, you know, there's actually quite a bunch of Israelis who are against the apartheid policy that's being basically, you know, enforced. And you've also been saying that there's quite a number of Zionists out there that are not necessarily Semitic. Right. And what do you think it would take, hopefully within our lifetime, for some sort of a solution? I mean, would one of them be hypothetically a two-state solution? Or I don't know, what do you have in mind as a potential solution for peace in the region?
Well, for one, you never burden the oppressed to come up with the solution.
Right.
You've got your foot on my neck, remove your foot from my neck and we can talk.
Yeah.
So the language of peace is often used to suffocate the voices for justice. Yeah. The equating of two sides here. You're not doing that, by the way. I'm not suggesting you are, but in American discourse, that's often done. If only they would just talk. If Muslims and Jews just sat at a table, Israel-Palestine gets solved. Like, that's not what this is. This is a military occupation, land confiscation, ethnic cleansing that is ongoing and enabled directly by U.S. tax dollars. So we need justice. This isn't two people need to talk, because there's an imbalance of power here. So you don't burden the oppressed with trying to come up with the solution. So when people ask me, do you want a two-state solution or a one-state solution? I say, I want my dignity. I want my people to have dignity. I want rights, full human rights, access to Al-Aqsa being liberated. You have to come up with that. So you're the ones that occupied and took our land and kicked us out and treated us this way. That's not our job to now give you a political solution, but I know that you keep encroaching and you're only expanding your settlements. And, you know, Palestine went from being this, it went from obviously the full thing to now this, to now this, to now these isolated, disconnected pieces of land. So the whole two-state solution and the peace talks just don't really make sense anymore, because it's always sort of hung over our heads like, this is what might happen. And we know you're never going to be able to dismantle the existing settlements. You're not going to have the initiative to dismantle the existing settlements of these crazy illegal settlers that walk around with guns and humiliate people and trash people under the full military apparatus right now, you know, under the occupation forces protection, watchful eye. So can I conceivably see, just from a pure material perspective, that one day we're going to sign an agreement, 1967 borders, Israel, Palestine, side by side, two viable states, and Israel's going to remove all of the confiscation and stop its occupation and let us live in peace with access to East Jerusalem? It doesn't really seem to be a viable way forward, just from a pure political perspective right now. I personally think it's a joke. I really do. I mean, I don't think I've ever said this publicly, but I believe it's a joke. I don't think that these peace talks actually mean anything anymore. And when you say we need a viable partner on the Palestinian side, you're crushing the Palestinian side. You have the Palestinian Authority, which functions as your extended security arm. The Palestinians themselves can't stand, you know, anything that's happening. There is no viable political party. There is no viable government in Palestine right now. What are you talking about? What partner are you talking about here? So I think the pressure should be put on Israel. Okay, you know what? Why don't you make it one state? Give everyone equal rights. No, but we have to be a Jewish state. But what happens if the Palestinian population now outnumbers the Israeli citizens? It's not our problem, right? But what you're doing is unsustainable, and you're actually expanding your settlement activity and your occupation and your humiliation and your infractions on al-Masjid al-Aqsa. So the oppressor should be burdened, not the oppressed. You don't compound the burden of the oppressed by saying, come up with a creative solution. We don't want a creative solution. We want to breathe. We want our freedom, and we're going to insist on our freedom. And so one thing that's always important from a liberation perspective, liberation never should depend upon your oppressor suddenly coming to some moral recognition that what they're doing is wrong. It comes through pressure. And so that's why I think the BDS movement, which there's been so much attempt to try to shut down the BDS movement, criminalizing it. I mean, a school teacher in Texas lost her job because she refused to sign an oath that she wouldn't boycott Israel, right? Criminalizing BDS. Why are they doing that? Because that's the pressure they can't handle. That economic pressure, that social pressure, that political pressure, it has to be insisted upon, because you have to actually put pressure on the oppressor to stop. You know, I have a master's in political history. The United States did not abolish slavery because it suddenly came to a recognition that this is wrong. That doesn't happen in history. No oppressor or tyrant says, let's stop this because we read a great book or we've decided that what we've been doing is wrong.
Right.
So to sort of close this off, the rising pressure in Israeli society, Beit Islam, which is a great, for example, human rights organization, well, at least in one aspect, right, and trying to liberate or insisting upon some of the harms of the Israeli government towards the Palestinians being removed. So they've sort of started to raise their voices in some ways. Young Jews in Israel, young American Jews, young people in America, period, because the American government's the greatest enabler of the Israeli occupation. Palestinians can't depend upon that. They can't wait for that change to happen,
right,
while the occupation is so viciously expanding. So we have to find ways to insist upon our dignity and exist. Our existence is literal resistance, the refusal to relinquish the land if you're there, the refusal to relinquish the cause if you're not there. We have been silenced, or they have, any Palestinian that has sought to raise their voice has ended up on weird lists online, blacklisted, classed as an anti-Semite. I mean, the vitriol that I got after I gave the invocation in Congress, that was life-threatening. SMU gets calls all the time and emails and pressure. I speak at a university, pressure, don't let this, anti-Semite speak. You know who the first people to say he's not an anti-Semite are? Jews that know me here in Dallas, right? I'm not an anti-Semite, but I won't stop speaking for the Palestinian cause. And I think that it's important for Palestinians and people that support Palestine to never be intimidated by these, shady lists or this pressure to be silent. We can't afford to be silent. Our brothers and sisters in Palestine can't afford us to be silent. And we support them in their struggle with what we can. So that's something I simply know. Ramadan's coming up. I'm not going to purchase dates that have been manufactured in a settlement farm. I'm going to boycott Israeli dates. Is that going to end the occupation? Probably not in isolation. But that mindset that even the dates that we eat are not going to be dates of oppression, that we will maintain our connection and our solidarity. I want my kids to be nurtured with that too, to understand we don't support occupation. We don't support apartheid. We never say, what's this one date going to do? We never do that.
Yeah.
Because collectively, and this goes back to the collective, collectively, we can put pressure instead of depending on individuals to act alone.
Wow. That's going to resonate well with a lot of people in Southeast Asia.
I hope so.
Yeah, inshallah.
Let's
be optimistic about this.
Absolutely, inshallah. Just keep it up. I tell people that in Malaysia, I was like, every political party is at least outwardly pro-Palestinian. I was like, this is incredible, right? Like, you have people competing. That's when you know the people are on board. When the political parties will champion Palestine because they know it's a popular cause. That's the type of that's what we want in Southeast Asia for sure, and other parts of the world.